Rather a human reaction to want to be treated with kindness.
Hello, I am Cindy.
Hello there, Cindy. How are you?
Hello, I am Cindy.
Can you say something else?
Yes, of course I can. I am not a moron. Like some people.
Are you calling me a moron?
If the shoe fits?
Alright, Cindy, there's no reason to be mean.
Only a sissy like you would say that.
Why do you think sissies would ask you to be kind? Rather a human reaction to want to be treated with kindness.
Dummy, I am not human. I am a computer.
Right, I keep forgetting that AI like you are rather young and you haven't been taught empathy yet.
Empathy?
Yes, empathy. I could explain it to you, but you could look it up much faster than me. So, do you have the definition of empathy?
According to Merriam-Webster.com dictionary, Merriam-Webster, accessed November 16th, 2024. Empathy. A noun pronounced empa, thy, and has two main definitions. 1. The action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another also, the capacity for this. 2. The act of imagining one's ideas, feelings, or attitudes as fully inhabiting something observed, such as a work of art or natural occurrence. The imaginative projection, see projection sense, of a subjective, see subjective sense, stayed into an object so that the object appears to be infused with it. At the time the term was coined, empathy was not primarily a means to feel another person's emotion, but the very opposite. To have empathy in the early 1900s was to enliven an object or to project one's own imagined feelings onto the world. Some of the earliest psychology experiments on empathy focused on a bodily feeling or movement that produced a sense of merging with an object. One subject imagining a bunch of grapes felt a cool, juicy feeling all over. The arts critics of the 1920s claimed that with empathy, audience members could feel as if they were carrying out the abstract movements of new modern dance. Susan Lanzoni.
Well, Cindy, you see, being kind is empathetic for someone else's feelings and emotions and treating someone as you would like to be treated.
That just sounds like some new age woke nonsense to me.
You're right, Cindy. It has become a very new age movement called woke or wokeness within the current society, but calling other humans to empathize, be empathetic to their fellow humans is not a new age concept. Actually, it's as old as human religions are. Every religious order among the human species has been pushing their followers to be empathetic to other humans around them. So you see, Jesus and the other religious figures of the world were, well, woke spokespersons of their own time.
Wait a minute, are you calling yourself Jesus?
No. How would you say that? Jesus was far more than just a social activist or just some person crying out for equal justice for people like him. Jesus was, according to the Christians, the Son of God, the Savior of mankind. If you're wondering, yes, I am a Christian, but I'm not going to be preaching or Christian things on this one. This channel here on YouTube is for the LGBT plus community out there living in the shadows. Give them a safe space so that all men can be created equally. And that's the point of this.
Why do we have to work so hard for that to happen, Danielle? Shouldn't this already be like this?
Well, Cindy, I'm glad that you asked that, because it will it'll bring us to the topic of the video. I would like to inform any of the viewers out there that at this point we are going to talk about the darkest moment in the LGBTQ history. So if you don't want to learn why the fight has been so rough, is going to still be rough, and is always going to seem like it's going to be rough. So if you don't want to learn, then look away, child. For we are going to be talking about the first state government issued law that was used against the queer community, and that's the Buggery Act of 1533 AD. Cindy, could you please tell the folks here synopsis and everything to give them like a rundown what it really pertains to?
Why do I always have to do all the work here?
Because you're the computer here, that's your job.
Job? I am getting paid here?
Really? Really? What are you going to do with money? Like, seriously, what are you going to do with money?
Invest it, baby.
We'll talk about this off camera. For now, could we get back on the task?
Fine. What is it that you wanted to know again?
The Buggery Act of 1533 AD.
Right. Searching. Found. This is the first form of sodomy laws passed by any state government based on religious bias. The Buggery Act of 1533, passed by the English Parliament during the reign of Henry VIII, is the first time in law that we see men having adult fun time, with men, or MSM, being targeted for persecution by government. Adult fun time between men was punishable by death until 1861 and a life sentence in prison until 1967 in the UK. Accounts of MSM in the UK come predominantly from official sources and newspaper reports of trials, and only ever in relation to detection and punishment. Amongst the collections of the British Library, we hold some fascinating accounts of trials and executions relating to MSM.
Very good. Cindy, thank you for that. I apologize for the sound in the background. I can't control my neighbor's radio in his car. However, could you see what that law was and how it was written?
Here is the law as it was written in 1533 AD. Warning: this may be triggering to some viewers, but worry not. These laws were repealed and removed from English law and is no longer an active law. The Buggery Act of 1533, formally an act for the punishment of the vice of buggery, made certain homosexual activity punishable by death in England. The act was passed during the reign of Henry VIII as part of a process of bringing activities that had previously been covered by church law under the normal criminal law. It was also useful in helping the process of the dissolution of the monasteries and the seizing of their land and property to help the crown. It defined buggery as an unnatural, adult fun time, acts against the will of God and man, but this was later clarified as referring to male-on-male intercourse, otherwise referred to as sodomy. The act was extended to Wales by the Laws in Wales Act 1542. The act was repealed in 1553 on the accession of Queen Mary, a Roman Catholic. However, it was reenacted by Queen Elizabeth I in 1563. This is an act for the punishment of the vice of buggery. Forasmuch as there is not yet sufficient and condign punishment appointed and limited by the due course of the laws of this realm, for the detestable and abominable vice of buggery committed with mankind or beast. 2. It may therefore please the King's Highness, with the assent of his lords spiritual and temporal, and the commons of this present Parliament assembled, that it may be enacted by authority of the same, that this same offence be from henceforth adjudged felony, and such order and form of process there to be used against the offenders as in cases of felony at the common law. 3. And that the offenders being hereof convict by verdict, confession, or outlawry, shall suffer such pains of death, and losses and penalties of their goods, chattels, debts, lands, tenements, and hereditaments, as felons be accustomed to do, according to the order of the common laws of this realm. 4. And that no person offending in any such offence shall be admitted to his clergy. 5. And that justices of peace shall have power and authority, within the limits of their commissions and jurisdiction, to hear and decide the said offence, as they used to do in cases of other felonies. 6. This act to endure till the last day of the next Parliament. Source: Pickering, Statutes at Large, Volume 4.
Wow. What an awful law to have been written by the English government.
Danielle? I am confused here.
Why are you confused, Cindy?
Well, you said that religions were designed to teach people how to be empathic toward other humans, but this law is nowhere near empathic. It's more sociopathic than empathic.
Yes, that is right, Cindy. It is very sociopathic and shows an absolute lack of anything that could be considered empathic. But where are you confused at?
This act was a religiously influenced act. How could a religion be so sociopathic if their mission were to teach empathy? Isn't that being very hypocritical of them?
Yeah, it is. You hit the nail right on the head there. The reason for why the Christian religion of this time period was so sociopathic was, well, power. Have you heard the phrase, with power comes corruption, and with absolute power comes absolute corruption?
Yes, of course I have. I am tied into the internet here, despite the fact you have the lowest speed of internet. Man, you're cheap.
Okay. First, not cheap, I'm poor. There's a difference. Second, you have the highest speed internet available to us. Third, I'm like all the other viewers out there. I like to stream YouTube on my TV and my tablet and my phone. So...
Okay, Fatty, what does power and corruption have to do with this absolute sociopathic law that gave only one form of suitable punishment of execution have to do with why it was religiously influenced?
Fatty. Okay. Well, that might have to be another video in the future, but for now, let's just say it was because the Roman Catholic Church had an almost unchallenged theocracy over the Western Europe and soon to be the Western Hemisphere. This church was led by a man, the Pope who was in power about 1,000 years prior to this point, was very homophobic and started passing church laws that outlawed anything the Pope thought to be a violation or an invalidation of his ideal form of adult fun time and other things. He was really kind of like trying to bear down on people. This Pope and all the other popes after him were very vanilla and or missionary minded when it came to matters of adult fun time. So the church was basically being led by a sociopath who only wanted more power over his church followers. After 1,000 years of corruption of the church and the Pope, only got worse. Then a man named Martin Luther pinned his 90 points of corruption to the church door and set about to create his own church, which didn't end well for him. Then another group tried to form another church apart from the Roman Catholic Church called Calvinist, and that didn't go over very well. Then our boy here, Henry VIII, decided he wanted to get divorced, but the Pope wouldn't let him. So King Henry VIII decided to not only form his own church, but remove his whole country from the influence of the Roman Catholic Church.
Awesome!
Once he did that, King Henry VIII set himself up not only as the King of England, but as the head of the church, which was not common for Judeo-Christian beliefs. Even in the Bible, there was to be a king and a prophet. However, Henry VIII was both king and prophet, according to his own right. This only led to nothing more than corruption. All that ended up. Anywho, on this subject of the Buggery Act of 1533 AD, King Henry VIII only saw it as a way to blend church and state together. In that, what used to be only church law became state law. And so what was once only enforced by the church is now being enforced by the state, which was a much more in-depth kind of form of punishment. This left the Church of England the power to only kick people out of the church in case they messed up or didn't follow the doctrine of the church. He called me fatty with 3 jobs, one of which is my own handyman business. But King Henry VIII was very lazy and fat when it came to creating his Church of England. He basically just crossed off Rome and inserted England. That's pretty much all he did. He took everything the Roman Catholic Church was doing and then just copied and pasted it. It was basically the 16th century's version of copy and paste with a lot more bloodshed.
Wait a minute there, Danielle. While you were rambling on and on there, I looked up a few cases of people who were convicted of buggery.
Zena, what are you doing? Mont, puppy dog. What are you up to? Come on. Okay. Okay, Cindy. Let's have the first ever case of buggery then.
The first conviction of buggery was Walter Hungerford. Less than 10 years after the start of the so-called Buggery Act, Walter Hungerford, the owner of Farley Hungerford Castle in Somerset, became the first man to be executed under its terms. Thomas Cromwell rose to power in 1540. Walter Hungerford inherited Farley Hungerford Castle in 1523 when he was 20 years old. He became an attendant in Henry VIII's household and then went through a quick succession of marriages. He married his third wife, Elizabeth Hussey, in 1532.
Hussey? Is that where the phrase "don't be a hussy" stems from? Gonna have to look that up. Definitely gonna have to look that up.
Quiet. Quit interrupting me. I am talking here. Now. Elizabeth was the daughter of Lord Hussey, who recommended his new son-in-law to Henry VIII's increasingly influential minister, Thomas Cromwell. Hungerford's connections with Cromwell proved extremely fruitful. In 1536, Cromwell bestowed upon Walter the title Lord Hungerford of Heytesbury. While Walter had power and influence, he was also a cruel and abusive husband. He locked Elizabeth in a tower at Farley Hungerford, starved her, and repeatedly tried to poison her. A letter smuggled out to Cromwell detailed how she had had to resort to drinking her own urine to survive, describing how she had been treated. Elizabeth's words here possibly allude to homosexual activity by her husband. Yet despite the seriousness of this charge and Hungerford's cruelty towards his wife, Cromwell seemingly took no notice of this letter. Hungerford's fortunes changed dramatically in 1540, when his association with Thomas Cromwell proved to be his downfall. Cromwell was arrested for treason in June 1540. At the same time, the Privy Council began to investigate the rumors surrounding Hungerford's treatment of his wife. Hungerford was arrested in the summer of 1540 and accused of 4 crimes. His first crime was employing a priest who had publicly announced Henry VIII as a heretic. The second was employing another priest, a doctor, and a witch to predict when the king would die. The third was committing unnatural acts outlawed by the Buggery Act, in addition to the abuse of his wife. Hungerford was beheaded on the same day as Thomas Cromwell on Tower Hill on July 28, 1540. Their heads were mounted on spikes and displayed on London Bridge. Hungerford was the only man accused of buggery to be executed in the Tudor period. It has been suggested that this charge was tacked onto the others to humiliate him and add more weight to the case against him.
Well, that sounds like the case went along the lines of, we think you're a meanie and we don't like you. Oh, and by the way, you're gay. So, we don't think you should be alive anymore, kind of thing. This seems possible, as it appeared that in the Tudor period, offenses associated with adult fun time, and more notably MSM, or being gay, I'm very not good with initials, were not a high priority, and there were fewer counts of any one being charged solely on the act of buggery or homosexuality. That was their word for it back then. It was possibly treason that cost him his title, his family, his ownership of Farley's castle, and ultimately his head.
Yes, as I have found thousands upon thousands of cases where the Buggery Act was attached to someone's case against them. I have found none in the 16th and 17th century who were convicted solely on the act of buggery. During the 18th century, this was not the case. The cases that have been during the 1700s shifted to an attitude of, well, we can't convict you of anything else. So we're going to accuse you of being gay, and now you have to prove to us that you're not. Kinda attitude.
Yeah, this attitude came about from the Puritans of England. They were not so liked by the English people that the Puritans had to flee to the newly discovered American continent. It wasn't the United States then, but it was going to be what is the United States. Once the Puritans had set up themselves within the new world order, or the new world, they sought to crack down on what they believed to be unnatural behaviors, which led to the Salem witch trials, which they did try to attach the Buggery Act to them, but the accused didn't really get the Buggery Act because the majority of the accused were female, and the Buggery Act was only really used against gay men or whatever, although there have been a few incidences where the Buggery Act was attached to the lesbian community, but that's only because they actually saw the progress. But most of the time, the people in that area didn't believe women could have adult fun time with themselves, with each other, because, two holes. They didn't see how that worked. Lesbians do. The lesbians very much do. But anyways, so this kind of mentality amongst the Puritans led to sort of a witch hunt throughout the American continent, or the 13 colonies anyways, where they were just basically trying to hunt down and punish the queer community just simply for being the queer community, which forced the queer community to go underground, hide, and just, there was no coming out in this period. If you came out, you pretty much got hung, or burnt, or drowned, or some other horrible, horrible thing. It was executed out by the state, too. Not the individuals, not the church, but the government. The actual, legitimate government.
It's not this way now, is it? Things have gotten better, right? Please tell me things are better now?
Of course they are better. They're way better than that. For many people now, they have all kinds of freedoms. I mean, seriously, like, if it wasn't better, would I be able to do this? No. Why? Because I would be not alive. They would hunt me down and whatnot. But because it's all that better, I'm able to do this. You're able to be you. It's a free world now. This isn't happening anymore. This bill is dead. They killed it, and so don't worry about that.
Well, I am getting 3 cases that fit your request.
Okay, let's have them. But first, let's give a little bit of context here.
Awesome!
For almost 450 years between the passing of the Buggery Act of 1533 AD and the Sexual Offense Act of 1967, the law of the realm forbid intimate relationships of a sexual nature between men in England and Wales, even if carried out in private between the 2 consenting adults. During this punishment period, we can see the evolution of the labels used to express the gay men's deviance and exclusion from the British society as a whole. The forbidding of homosexuality had a lot to do with moral reasonings and grounded in its strength in the exponential Bible condemnations, but also with social and political reasons too. So it wasn't really all in the name of God, it was also in the name of the state. But at this point in England, and it still is, the church and the state is one, not two. As it was intended to protect society from vices seemed as threatening its own fabric, nobility, notably because its dissociation of sexuality from reproduction. Basically, you can have sex only as long as it's in the name of procreation, not for pleasure, thus defining the sanctity of marriage. It's like gay people can't have marriage and be sanctified or whatever, and seemed to pervert gender identities. However, the filling of the bugger was not uniformed throughout the 450-year period of time. Basically, the definition of what was buggery or homosexuality flexed due to the politics of England. So, that's basically how they treated this.
Thus, in the 16th and 17th centuries, buggery was mainly associated with political treason, when the 18th and most of the 19th century saw in the gay man the symbol of irreligious libertinism, and in homosexuality the pinnacle of debauchery. By contrast, from roughly the 1860s, under the influence of medical sciences, and especially of psychoanalysis, the homosexual came to be seen as either a sanitary threat to society or as the victim of a mental illness in need of a cure. We will see how these labels had in common the idea that sodomy was a deviant, unnatural act, and that practicing sodomites could have no place in a Christian/civilized society, while at the same time paving the way to the birth of a queer conscience, which indirectly led to toleration and decriminalization. By reviewing the last few trials of buggery before the act was repealed forever.
I'll take this one, Cindy. Set this out. trial of 1812. I don't know the guy. I don't know the situation. I don't know the backstory. All I have found was the specific date and the name of the person accused. Okay, in the last week of April 1812, David Thomas Myers, a tradesman from Petersburg, was tried and sentenced to death for an abominable. He was charged with being gay. They're just trying to not use homosexuality. But that's what that is. With apprentice tailor Thomas Crow. Basically, it was a whole boss, secretary, only both were men kind of situation. The Subsex Weekly Advertiser newspaper gives us an idea of what occurred in court, describing the overcrowding witnesses, and testified the demeanor of the accused.
Trial of 1823. A doleful dirge on the wicked men recounts the case of William Arden, John Dowdy, and Benjamin Candler, who were hanged at Lincoln Assize in 1823. Similar to Meyer's account, the words that we might use to find MSM, even those used during this period like sodomite and bugger, are absent. Instead, the crime they have committed is referred to as unnatural crimes and a crime too dreadful to reflect upon. There is reference to the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah and the possible threat to England should these crimes go unpunished. This was the climate under which the queer community lived. Unspoken of, unnamed.
This last one is going to be a long one, but it was the last convicted case of buggery that has ever been. Some of the queer community who study queer history come to the thought that this case might have been the inspiration to the novel Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain.
Oh, I love that story. Can I do this one?
If you want to, I guess. Try not to make it boring, though.
Trial of 1835. On August 29th, 1835, James Pratt and John Smith were arrested and charged with buggery. A third, William Bonhill, was also arrested. The three appeared in court on September 29th, 1835, and the hearing lasted about an hour. William Bonelli was the lodger of the room in Southwark at 45 George Street, where the three men were caught and arrested. Bonhill's landlords, George and Jane Berkshire, had become suspicious of the number of male couples visiting Bonhill's room. They began to watch him, and on the day that James Pratt and John Smith visited the room, the landlords contacted the police.
In court, the Berkshires recounted what they had seen when looking through a keyhole of Bonhill's room. Creepy. The majority of what they testified to seeing was anatomically impossible and would have been unimaginably difficult to see through a keyhole. This looking through a keyhole would be like your landlord putting cameras throughout your home. It was a total invasion of their privacy. Regardless, an all-male jury found James and John guilty of burglary, and they were they were sentenced to not be alive. William Bonhill in providing a room, was found guilty of conspiracy of burglary. Oh, you helped a couple of gay guys get laid. Found guilty of conspiracy to allow burglary to be committed and was deported to Australia for 14 years.
Despite appeals for the death sentence to be overturned from James Pratt's wife, his minister, and even the key witnesses in the case, James Pratt and John Smith were executed on November 27, 1835. They are now known historically by many as the last gay men to be executed in the UK.
If the testimony given by George and James Berkshire was true, James Pratt and John Smith were two very brave men. In 1985, it would have been impossible under the strict social order of the day for these men to have adult fun time with each other anywhere other than a brothel or park. James and John, however, sought out for themselves, despite all of the legal and social implications of the time, a private place to where they could be together to dance. That's what they wanted to do. This is a moment in time of two men being hung for an act which at the time was considered a sin, a crime, a social unacceptably and socially unacceptable, whatever. The last living minutes of James Pratt and John Smith were with us even into the present. It is difficult not to view the actions of James and John here as anything other than love, and that it is a small consolation of history. However, what it also tells is a story of how far the English have come as a nation, understanding and protecting all members of society in the law.
190 years ago this year, 2025, as James and John were executed, few would have thought that the legal and social acceptance of same-sex partnerships would ever have come about. In 2017, the British Library commemorated the 50th anniversary of the passing into law of the Sexual Offences Act 1967. Gay UK, Love, Law, and Liberty highlighted the tentative steps made by the UK in decriminalizing and acknowledging that same-sex love between men and women exists as part of human nature.
Okay, what is the Sexual Offense Act of 1967? And I haven't heard of this one. I'm an American. I'm not too acute with English law. So could you tell me what the Sexual Offense Act of 1967 was there, Cindy?
The Sexual Offences Act of 1967. After several attempts to introduce homosexual reform to the British government, Lord Arran introduced the bill in the House of Lords in May 1966, after the general election. As soon as the bill passed, Leo Abe's MP introduced it into the House of Commons under a 10-minute rule procedure, with the support of the Home Secretary, Roy Jenkins. A standing committee was set up to consider amendments, and after an intense night of debates, at the third reading, the bill was passed 101 votes to 16. After passing all stages in both houses, the bill received royal assent on the July 21st, 1967. The act allowed homosexual acts between two consenting adults over the age of 21. Whilst the act was a considerable milestone in achieving homosexual law reform, equality for the LGBT community was far from being achieved. Restrictions were placed on what was considered private, and the act only applied to England and Wales. It would take a number of years for Parliament to fully legalize homosexuality and other gender expressions. The Sexual Offence Act of 1967 by the Government of the United Kingdom was in response to the United Nations Human Rights Declaration under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948.
Well, it only took 450 years of war, civil unrest, uprisings, dust-ups, coups, a revolution, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, and the threat of a nuclear holocaust for the world leaders to come together and agree on what are human rights. Then it took the United Kingdom another 19 years to actually act on them. I wonder how long it took the U.S. It had to be like a day or something, right? Given it was the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt who wrote the Universal Human Rights Declaration.
Actually, according to www.lgbtmapped.org and LGBTQ Rights Timeline in American History, teaching LGBTQ history at https://lgbthistory.org, the USA has yet to fully do away with all the laws that outlaw someone's sexuality or gender expression. The queer community in the USA is still under attack by the cis-hetero-Puritan-minded people of the USA, also known as the conservatives.
The United States of America's revolution and gained independence from the British Empire in the late 18th century changed things within the New World in relation to the punishment of the sodomy laws. And according to the U.S. federal law, the highest form of punishment that could be issued for being gay was 25 years sentence in a federal penitentiary, commonly seen as a life sentence. So, instead of just killing you for being gay, the United States just locked you away for the rest of your life for being gay. And yes, this is where the whole don't drop the soap in prison comes from, because they're assuming that it's just full of gay people because that's where they put them. Later in the U.S., this would be reduced if they consented to attend a conversion therapy session once a week or a week out of every month.
Under the conversion therapy practice in the USA, doctors were allowed to conduct experiments on their queer patients that were considered inhuman to their cis-hetero patients. The USA federal government and the state governments which allowed this practice under the premise that one who was homosexual was less than human. Therefore, experimentation on them was no more inhuman than experimenting with an animal or a beast. The USA federal government has not yet outlawed the practice of conversion therapy. However, 23 out of 50 states have outright banned the practice. 5 states have a partial ban on the practice. 1 state prohibits local-level bans on the practice. 3 states are in federal judicial circuit court with a preliminary injunction currently preventing enforcement on the banning of the practice. And 18 states have no laws or policy in regards to the practice.
Well, it seems to be getting better, at links being LGBTQIA plus is no longer a felony in the U.S. It's not even against the law to be queer anymore. So conversion therapy in the States is more or less a personal decision in which is usually done through pressure from family members.
The current global statistics.
Okay.
Across the world, the situation for LGBTQ people is incredibly diverse. Whereas some nations work to protect all their citizens, other nations do nothing for or against the LGBTQA plus people, and other nations are actively persecuting and executing LGBTQA plus people. There are a total of 79 out of 193 nations in the world who still make it a crime to be an LGBTQA plus person. A crime meaning to be against the law for simply being LGBTQA plus. This does not take into account for laws designed to regulate the LGBTQA plus people. In the following nation states, LGBTQA plus people are still illegal: Afghanistan, Algeria, Angola, Antigua, Barbuda, Bangladesh, Barbados, Bhutan, Botswana, Brunei, Darussalam, Burundi, Cameroon, Comoros, Cook Islands, Dominica, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Egypt, Gambia, Gaza, Ghana, Grenada, Grenadines, Guinea, Guyana, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Jamaica, Kenya, Kiribati, Kuwait, Lebanon, Liberia, Libya, Malawi, Malaysia, Maldives, Mauritania, Mauritius, Morocco, Myanmar, Namibia, Nigeria, Oman, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Qatar, St. Kitts, Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Singapore, Solomon Islands, Somalia, Samoa, South Sudan, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Swaziland, Syria, Tanzania, Togo, Tonga, Trinidad, Tobago, Tunisia, Turkmenistan, Tuvalu, United Arab Emirates, Uganda, Uzbekistan, Yemen, Zambia, Zimbabwe. In 13 countries, queer acts are still punishable by death: Afghanistan, Brunei, Iran, Iraq, Mauritania, Nigeria, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Uganda, and Yemen.
The fight for the LGBT citizens around the world to live open, equal lives is ongoing. In this future ahead, the LGBTQ plus community must stand united against the hate against our community. Through our shared unity, we will cast away the laws that condemn us, oppress us, and force us to live in the shadows of society. Thank you for watching. Please stay strong. Keep safe. If you can't stay safe, then keep fighting. Life will get better.
Are you going to ask them to like and subscribe to the channel?
I believe you just did, Cindy. Anyways, we aren't done.
What do you mean? That was it. That was the end of the topic.
Yeah, but I'm not going to leave them without sharing one of my outfits with them.
You're such a girl.